Hey y'all, this is Marla K. Hope everybody is doing well. Today this video is going to be about martial law, what happens when it is exercised or implemented, the difference between civil authority and civil law, where those things originate, and then what we need to be doing or how we need to be thinking, because when this happens, people are going to be not aware of their rights, especially our people. Our people are very ignorant about rights. They think they are free. They don't understand they are not free. They think that they are gonna be protected, or there's some type of help for them, that the government is there to protect them. The government is never there to protect them. The government is there to protect itself. And when we fall under martial law, what happens moving forward as all these different agendas start coming together and the chaos ensues? We need to know how to protect ourselves. We need to know how other people are going to behave. And, all of these things rely upon folks in positions of power to do the will of the powers that be. Now, we know when, I'm not going to say that. Okay, just be quiet. Okay, so I'm going to start this lesson off with Ecclesiastes 3 and everything in God's own time. Because for us who are awakened, there's going to be a time, like this is our time for us to speak and be loud and scurry and put away things, so on and so forth. The time is coming where we're going to have to be quiet and be inside, minding our own business and trying to avoid being harmed by those who are not prepared, and anything else, any other dangers that are coming our way, whether it's famine, pestilence, plagues, MOTB, those types of things. So I'm going to start off with 3. Everything has its time, and there is a specific time for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pull out what was planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to cry, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. And a time to stop hugging. A time to start looking and a time to stop looking. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear apart and a time to sew together. A time to keep quiet and a time to speak out. There's a time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. So I wanted to read because those times are coming. All the time to do things are now, and a time to not do things is also coming quickly. And so we need to be prepared for those things. And martial law is something that I have been thinking about lately. And I had a friend send me a post last night about it. And it's a person that is not really awakened. Like, they are awakened, but they're not as deep into it as we are. So when that person sent me something about martial law, I was like, oh, so you paying attention, and you must be a little concerned, but I don't know, how concerned they are. So I want to share a couple of things with you about martial law and how we can prepare. So this is from Investopedia. It was updated August 20th, 2024, which is interesting because, again, the constant updates means that people are paying attention and adding new things to their pages for us to get. So it says martial law, the substitution of a civil government by military authorities to deal with the crisis. So I want to first start with just the first paragraph, and I'm going to go back to civil government, a civil authority. So it says, what is martial law? Martial law is the substitution of a civil government by military authorities with unlimited powers to suspend the ordinary legal protections of civilian rights. A state of martial law may be declared in response to a crisis or imposed during a coup. In times of a disaster or civil unrest, a declaration of emergency is more common than a declaration of martial law because it is easier to reverse. An emergency declaration allows the government to expand its powers temporarily to deal with the crisis, suspending some civil liberties but avoiding military control. So let's talk about civil authority for a second, and then I'm going to talk about civil law so you can get an understanding why this, whenever it's instituted, will be definitely associated with the New World Order. So civil authority or civil government is the practical implementation of a state on behalf of its citizens other than through military units, which is martial law, that enforces law and order, and that is distinguished from religious authority. For example, canon law and secular authority. The enforcement of law and order. Notice I love these politicians love talking about law and order, law and order. So they're always talking about state law, states' rights, civil authority, civil government when they talk about law and order. It says the enforcement of law and order is typically the role of the police in modern states. So, thus, 4 forms of authority may be seen. And so this is what you need to know about civil authority. And this is why I keep telling y'all we need to pay attention to the Vatican and the Pope and what they say, because religious authority and canon, which comes from them folk, is intertwined in civil authority. So the 4 forms of authority may be civil authority, military authority, religious authority, which is certain constitutions which exclude the state having any religious authority, which is the separation of church and state. So religious authority is separate from civil authority and military authority. And corporate authority, such as large business corporations with examples such as the former East India Company and Hudson's Bay Company. It can also mean the moral power of command supported by physical coercion, which the state does not exercise over its members. So I'm going to put a description of this. I'm sorry, I put a link to this in the description. But the final thing that I want to share is that in modern states, enforcement of law and order is typically the role of police, although the line between military and civil units may be hard to distinguish. When militias and volunteers such as yeomanry act in pursuance of non-military domestic objectives. Okay, so civil law. This is the one that's very interesting. Civil law, which is the legal system. So civil law, listen to this, is a legal system rooted in the Roman Empire and France, and was comprehensively codified and disseminated starting in the 19th century, most notably with France's Napoleonic Code, which was in 1804. Unlike common law, systems which rely heavily on judicial precedent, civil law systems are characterized by the reliance on legal codes that function as the primary source of law. Today, civil law is the world's most common legal system practiced in about 150 countries. So the law that stems from the Roman Empire and France is still alive and functioning in 150 countries today. So when folks tell you all roads lead back to Rome, this is why they say so. The law leads back to the Roman Empire that we use, that governs us. So there's one other thing I want to share with y'all before I move forward. Okay, so here it is. Historically, a civil law is the group of legal ideas and systems ultimately derived from the corpus juris civilis, but heavily overlain by, listen to this, Napoleonic, Germanic, canonical, which is religious, feudal, and local practices, as well as doctrinal strains such as natural law, codification, and legal positivism. The Napoleonic Code is the most widespread system of law in the world, in force in various forms in about 120 countries. So when you start getting into all these codes and different things that's getting ready to happen, all of it is tied back to Rome. So because of this, you know what to expect. Martial law is administered by the military rather than by a civilian government, typically to restore order. And so y'all know, because all roads lead back to Rome, y'all know what time it's going to be. I don't have to say no more. You've been following this channel, you already know what time it is. Martial law is declared in an emergency in response to a crisis or to control occupied territory. When martial law is declared, civil liberties such as the right to free movement, free speech, protection from unreasonable searches, and habeas corpus laws may be suspended. So this is important, so you understand we ain't gonna be able to move the way we want to move. You're not gonna be able to go where you want to go. You're not gonna be able to talk. We already are dealing with free speech, give or take, and have been for the last couple of years, so it's only going to get worse. Protection from unreasonable searches, which means when the military takes over and martial law is declared, you don't have a right to say, I don't want to be searched. They can search and you can't do anything about it. So when they come knocking and they want to take stuff, you need to understand that's what it is. And habeas corpus laws may be suspended. Understanding martial law. The declaration of martial law is a rare, momentous decision for a civilian government to make, and for good reason. When martial law is declared, civilian control of some or all aspects of government operations is ceded to the military. This means, in the case of elected governments, the representatives chosen by the voting population are no longer in power. So the moment that martial law is declared, your elected officials don't matter because the military will take over. Civilians have ceded control of the country in exchange for the potential restoration of order, with the possibility that control may not be reclaimed in the future. So that means like a coup. When martial law is declared, civil liberties such as the right to free movement, free speech, or the protection from unreasonable searches can be suspended. The justice system that typically handles issues of criminal and civil law is replaced with a military justice system, such as a military tribunal. So this is why you need to be understanding what military law is, because if they declare martial law, a lot of people are not going to be prepared, and they're going to be out talking about their rights, and they ain't going to have no rights, and they're going to get busted upside the head. Civilians may be arrested for violating curfews or for offenses that in normal times would be considered serious enough to warrant detention. Laws relating to habeas corpus that are designed to prevent unlawful detention may also be suspended, allowing the military to detain individuals indefinitely without the possibility of recourse. Declaring martial law. Considering the negative ramifications martial law can have on a country and its citizens, declaring martial law is a last resort reserved for situations where law and order are rapidly deteriorating. For example, in 1892, the governor of Idaho instituted martial law after serious labor unrest in the mining industry. Armed conflict had erupted between striking miners and their employers. Workers even resorted by dynamiting a mining facility. Martial law may be declared to reign in protest, civil unrest, coups d'etats, or insurrections. It may also be declared when a country's military occupies foreign territory, such as at the end of a war. Typically, the power to declare martial law rests with the nation's president or other top civilian leader. The circumstances in which it may be declared and other limiting factors, such as the amount of time it may be left in effect, are governed by legislation or a country's constitution. For example, a president may be authorized to declare martial law during a time of violent civil unrest, but only for 60 days. Specifically, looking at the United States, the Constitution is vague on martial law and doesn't really address it. And that's where our problem comes in, because the fact that it is vague is very problematic. And when it comes to this new world order that's coming in, it could be declared and stand indefinitely. So you could look at, some of these other countries that have had martial law declared and it's never been undone, and it's just become a military state, almost kind of like North Korea, that type of thing. So something else that I want to share with you is from military.com about martial law. As the computer decides it wants to move, I will go up to the top of the page. Alright, and I had to redo this video because when I got to the Wikipedia page, it just decided it was going to quit on me, honey. I just couldn't. It just said no, it was not doing nothing. Okay, so on military.com website, it says everything you need to know about martial law. This was published in 2023, and I don't think it's been updated, but it has some really good information here. So it says, what is martial law? While there is no universal definition, the term often refers to the use of military for law enforcement. And so that's what you need to understand. That's the gist of it. Military becomes your local law enforcement, or your state law enforcement. One of the things that concerns me is that states may buck and decide they're not going to participate, and so that could lead to a civil war where the state and the federal government are fighting, in addition to whatever else is going on. So we have to be prepared for all of these different scenarios. And I don't want to keep going back, over the same thing. It kind of gives you a lot of different scenarios, but I will say a couple of sites that I have read mostly indicate that martial law has been implemented mostly with us when it comes to desegregation, stuff like that. Integration, freedom rides, and workers going on strike and that type of civil unrest. Sometimes bloody events that put workers against corporations, and then the government comes in and fixes stuff. But there have been quite a few times in this country that martial law has been declared, and I found the information on martial law at military.com, pretty helpful. Now, another site that I want to share with you is Wikipedia. And this is going to be the last site. It's about martial law, but I want to tell you about what has changed. Hopefully this site will stay up. So, this whole thing is about martial law and the history of it. But the biggest thing that I want to talk about is the 2007 National Defense Authorization Act, which basically changed the command of the National Guard in each state, where the president could activate them without the consent of governors, which could set up a situation for a different type of civil war, not necessarily about us per se, but it just could be about states' rights. So H.R. 5122, also known as John Warner National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2007, was a bill passed in the United States Congress on September 29, 2006, and signed by President George W. Bush on October 17, 2006, becoming Public Law 109-364. In addition to allocating funding for the armed forces, it also gave the president the power to declare martial law and to take command of the National Guard units of each state without the consent of state governors. That's huge. On April 2007, U.S. Senate held hearings about recent changes to the Insurrection Act of 1807. Where Senator Leahy of Vermont sought to reverse the 2006 amendments to the Insurrection Act, which had given the U.S. president new powers to use military for domestic disturbance, terrorism, insurrection, and even changed the name from Insurrection Act to Enforcement of the Laws to Restore Public Order. In the Senate hearing, Senator Kit Bond testified, Mr. Chairman, quote, Mr. Chairman, the measure that was included in the last year's Congressional Defense Authorization Act, I think, was ill-conceived, unnecessary, and dumb. Even some of the members of the SASC, who should have did not know about it. So people who were, I guess, a part of some special committee didn't know about it. But this is an influential panel, and you know how it has changed the old law. And we know that all 50 of our nation's governors, adjutants, generals, and local law enforcement are opposed to it. And they were opposed to it because it takes away their rights to police themselves during any type of crisis. Now, this is why you have been seeing these federal bills come out asking law enforcement to work with them now. So now they can supersede law enforcement, but now they want to give law enforcement money and training to help them in event something happens. So like it's like they came over and became the umbrella for local law enforcement when it's never been like that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this works, because nothing works without people cooperating. So we're just going to see how well people cooperate if something happens. Okay, so it says allowing the president to invoke the act and declare martial law where public order breaks down as a result of natural disaster, epidemic, terrorist attack is very ambiguous and gives him broad authority potentially to usurp the role of the governors. So that's the end quote. So this is what is going to happen now as a result of martial law being declared. So this is what you need to be prepared for. You won't have local law enforcement, local law enforcement, and even possibly your local National Guard will not have any power. They may be under the authority of the federal government. Based on opposition by Congress, individual state governors, law enforcement community, and absence of clarity on who even introduced these changes, the enforcement of the laws to restore public order law was repealed on January 28, 2008, based on Senator Patrick Leahy's 513 proposal to repeal, and the previous Insurrection Act was restored. But as of 2020, the Insurrection Act of 1807 still applies in limiting a president's ability under Title X to federalize National Guard troops for martial law purposes. So I found that very interesting. But anyway, we need to keep an eye out on what is happening, because I just feel like with all the things going on with the drones and the orbs and the war and the tariffs and the famine and the pestilence and the plagues, the economic collapse on the horizon, other countries engaging in de-dollarization, the enemies within that have been intentionally let in here, we have just a pot of doo-doo waiting to explode. So with that said, there's going to be a time where we're not going to be able to move. There's going to be a time where we're not going to be able to talk. We're not going to be able to minister to each other. Even talking about what we're talking about now is not going to be allowed. So this is why in all you're getting now, you need to get your understanding. This is why now you need to learn about the law, martial law, as well as civil law. You need to have a plan for what happens in your community locally, because you may not have anybody coming to your community and you may have to be the law that you were looking for, especially if you live amongst black people, because they ain't gonna know what's going on. The other thing is, if there is no law enforcement, because law enforcement is now suspended, they're not going to be helpful to you. And if you have a situation where people are going to be out here like the purge, fending for themselves, you're going to find it difficult to navigate all that. So you need to be considering those types of things now. How do you protect yourself, protect your property, protect your home, and blend in and be a great person if things should break down? So I just want to have that conversation, because when my friend sent me that video last night, I was really surprised, because he's very scary and you can't hardly talk to him about nothing. He gets sick and got to lay down and take a rest. So when he sent it to me, I was like, okay, so he's listening for sure and paying attention. But I don't think he really understands the ramifications of what happens when this all kicks off, because it's not going to be no quick thing. It could be, but I don't think so. Because I think a lot of the plans that the powers that be have had for the West are not working. I don't think they have been anticipating us being awakened and pushing back. Although we have not pushed back nearly as much as we should have, I think the fact that they can monitor us with these algorithms and with these videos and different things, it gives them a gauge of how engaged we are. And so I just want y'all to really pay attention to what is happening and to make sure you are keeping up with what's going on everywhere. You got to keep your head on a swivel. But I think we're at a really critical juncture between December 24th to January 12th. I think that's going to be a critical time. And then anytime after that, before Code 45 takes office, I would not be surprised at what the Democrats do. I would not be surprised at what Joe Biden pulls, especially since he's going to visit the Vatican during the 9th, from the 9th through the 12th. He's going to Italy and to the Vatican and meet with Pope Francis. Because all roads lead to Rome, and because we know who's running the show and we know what everything is about, everything at the end of the day is about us. Keeping the lie perpetuated, hiding who we are, keeping the nations under wraps, and hoping they can successfully implement this stuff with no hiccups. I just see a lot of stuff happening, and a lot of stuff can happen, natural and unnatural. But y'all need to be ready for martial law at any time, because that is going to be the thing. Any inkling of chaos could institute this, and we have a wicked person in office who is working on behalf of the adversary, and we can't afford to look away, because we are collateral damage. We are collateral damage, so you got to pay attention. All right, y'all, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Links to all of these pages will be in the description. Please take the time to read about martial law for yourself. I recommend printing out some things about what you can and cannot do. Understand civil law and civil authority, civil government, and the difference between military law. It's gonna make the difference. It's just gonna make your life easier, and try to think about how you're gonna navigate these things when they start occurring, because you don't want to be out when these things start happening, or at least you want to be able to have what you need on your person and in your house, so that if you have to go hunker down, you can go hunker down, knowing that you're going to be quiet. You may have to help some people in your community, you may have to talk and educate people. That's the main thing. That's our job. We are obligated to help our brothers and sisters. So you may not be able to help them a whole lot, but at least if you can provide them some insight and knowledge, not that it's going to make things better for them, but at least you'll be able to help them. All right, this is Marley K. Please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Share the content and try to get people's minds open to the fact of what could be coming down the pipe. As we start seeing drones and orbs, and people start becoming fearful and frantic and saying all kind of stuff, it's just a matter of time before something big happens and people just start freaking out. So just be ready. All right, this is Marley K.